Good morning and welcome to the garden. Today we're going to be working on a couple different varieties of iris that I have in the garden. Iris is my favorite flower. Unfortunately, I have attempted to grow irises in my garden for many years, but it's just too shady and they don't bloom properly, and I have some problems with them. So I am going to remove them from my garden and replace them with shade-loving plants that will do much better in this location. So here I have a German bearded iris. They are very simple to remove, as the root system is quite shallow, and it's actually a rhizome. So as you see, as I break it apart, shake the dirt out of it a little bit. This is the root system, and this is the German bearded iris. They've grown together. This one is connected right here. I'll just snap that apart and grab my pruning shears, which I had in my belt, and fan the foliage. So I cut it so that it looks like a fan. It has that V shape. Come back here, cut this one off. That's a very nice looking piece of iris. I'm going to trim the roots back because I'm not replanting this one. I am going to store them in a little bit of peat moss just so that the roots stay moist. This is also an iris that is sold bare root in the fall of the year. You'll see just this rhizome with the dried up foliage in a box in many garden centers, and you take it home and hydrate it in some water and plant it back in the ground. When you're planting German bearded iris, the rhizome, the roots, the top of the root system, should be at the soil surface. It should not be buried deep. You should be able to see the top of the rhizome on the garden bed after it's done being planted. You also, when you're putting your mulch in, you don't want to smother the rhizome with mulch. This could also cause some problems with rot. There's one very prominent pest that is very devastating to the German bearded iris, and that is called an iris borer, which is a moth, and it lays its eggs inside the rhizome from the top that is exposed, and the larvae will feed on the rhizome, causing it to rot and die. So there are treatments for that, and I have never had a problem with iris borer, but if anybody has any questions about treating iris borer, please feel free to contact me through my website. So this is the German bearded iris. I have a few more here to dig out, and as I dig it out, there's a few other plants here that have wandered in, so to speak, that I normally don't want here. So if they're not what you want, it's a weed. So although this might be wild ginger and something that other people find desirable, I didn't plant it here and I don't want it here, so that to me is a weed. So I'm going to get digging. I'm going to take the rest of these out, and then I'm going to show you how to improve the soil where I removed the irises. I love how they just shake apart. They're so easy to transplant, to divide. even the baby ones will turn into beautiful irises planted in the proper place. All right, I made short work of that. Weeds are gone, irises are gone. All right, I've got some soil amendments here. I have a mixture of peat moss and composted cow manure, which I picked up at my local home improvement center. Just a suggestion, when you're purchasing bagged soil products, try to find a retailer that stores them under a canopy. Reason being is it's really hard to work with mud, and some of these bags that I did not buy from a canopy area were very, very muddy and clumpy. Just aren't going to give me that nice smooth amendment that I am looking for. So, but I do have some nice peat moss in here as well as the compost. I'm just gonna fork it in a little bit. It's important to get the amendments to where the roots are going to be. So I'm just gonna loosen this up a little bit, work it in. It's a small area, so I'll just use my fork to kind of rake it over, smooth it out. Get some of these roots and weeds and debris out of there. Nice and clean looking. Perfect. So I've kind of, because they're so shallow rooted, I'm using my fingers instead of a trowel or a shovel. I've made a small trench, and one will place the rhizome, the roots facing down or out. Gently bring the soil around, tucking it in somewhat with your fingers so it gets under the root. There's my rhizome right here, and I'm going to press it down lightly. Again, remember I have squirrels, so my squirrels like to dig things up. When planting an iris, it is, I have been told, and I guess I've never really checked on this for sure, but if you, whichever direction you plant the fan is the direction the flower should face. So I'm going to make another trench with my fingers. I'm going to set the roots in and gently fill back in, tucking the soil around the roots that are going down and firming it in gently. You don't have to pound it in, just firm it in. And this is a beautiful plant. I removed the dead leaves. My pruning shears, you'll notice that there's some damage there to the root system. I'm going to flip that off along with the longer roots. And there, I missed a fan. Bring it down a little bit. They don't need to be that long. They are going into dormancy now, so we have a nice fan here. Again, make a trench wide enough for the plant, and my soil is so nice and easy to work with that it's just a pleasure. So firming in the roots and then coming back and covering the rhizome. There's no need to give this plant any extra fertilizer right now. I would use a little root stimulator. I think we've talked about that in previous videos. It's just a solution with vitamins in it that helps promote root development and really helps to get your plants off to a successful start. We still have quite a few weeks before the freeze up, so I would anticipate that these would set in just perfectly before winter sets in. So, but because I'm not going to keep my irises here, I will simply remove these and gift them to someone with a garden that has more sun than I have. So this is the German bearded iris. Now let's take a walk over to another part of the garden where I have Japanese iris, and I will show you the difference in that plant. So this is my Japanese iris. And the difference between this one and the German bearded iris, as you can tell, the foliage is much more grass-like, and the flower is far more petite than the German bearded iris. This one is a little bit more difficult to divide. I'm going to come in and aggressively chop down to remove chunks of the plant. So you notice for the other iris, I used my garden fork, and for this one I am using my perennial shovel. Just because the root system on this plant is a little bit more fibrous, and as it grows, it creates a little bit tougher mat. Makes a big difference to have a sharp shovel. This is the root system of a Japanese iris. This also, you notice, has a sort of a rhizome, much thinner, and this is what prompts the plant to spread and fill in faster than the German bearded iris. So this is one single plant. But I suggest when you are transplanting these, unlike the German bearded iris where you plant one at a time, these you would plant in a cluster. So I would do something the size of this. You notice I already cut them back. It's a beautiful root system, looks very healthy, no pest damage. The only problem I had with this iris is it did not bloom because, again, I have a shade garden. So I'm going to pull this out, and as I did with the German bearded iris, I'm going to improve the soil with my compost and peat mix and replace this plant with a more shade-loving plant. Again, this is another plant that I will gift to somebody that has a sunnier garden, and hopefully they'll bring me a bouquet of irises during the summer. So thanks a lot for joining me in the garden today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care and be kind. Thanks.